Today I'm going to read chapters 4 and 5 of A Long Walk to Water. Chapter 4, Southern Sudan, 2008. Naya's mother took the plastic container from her and emptied the water into 3 large jars. She handed Naya a bowl of boiled sorghum meal and poured a little milk over it. Naya sat outside in the shade of the house and ate. When she was done, she took the bowl back inside. Her mother was nursing the baby, Naya's little brother. "Take Akir with you," her mother said, nodding towards Naya's sister. Glancing at her younger sister, Naya did not say what she was thinking. That Akir, who was only 5 years old, was too small and walked too slowly. "She needs to learn," her mother said. Naya nodded. She picked up the plastic container and took Akir by the hand. Home for just long enough to eat, Naya would now make her second trip to the pond. To the pond and back, to the pond and back. Nearly a full day of walking altogether. This was Naya's daily routine 7 months of the year. Daily. Every single day. Southern Sudan, 1985. Salva held his breath as he scanned the faces, one by one. Then the air left his lungs and seemed to take all hope with it. Strangers. No one from his family. The old woman came up behind him and greeted the group. "Where are you going?" she asked. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. There was no reply. The woman put her hand on Salva's shoulder. "This one is alone. Would you take him with you?" Salva saw doubt on the people's faces. Several men at the front of the group began speaking with each other. "He's a child. He will slow us down." "Another mouth to feed? It's already hard enough to find food." "He's too young to do any real work. He'll be of no help to us." Salva hung his head. They would leave him behind again, just as the others had. Then a woman in the group reached out and touched one of the men on the arm. She said nothing, but looked first at the man, then at Salva. The man nodded and turned to the group. "We will take him with us," he said. Salva looked up quickly. A few in the group were shaking their heads and grumbling. The man shrugged. "He's Dinka," he said, and began walking away. The old woman gave Salva a bag of peanuts and a gourd for drinking water. He thanked her and said goodbye. Then he caught up with the group, determined not to lag behind, not to complain, not to be any trouble to anyone. He did not even ask where they were going, for fear that question would be unwelcomed. He knew only that they were Dinka and that they would be trying to stay away from the war. He had to be content with that. The day became a never-ending walk. Salva's feet kept time with his thoughts in his head, the same words over and over. "Where is my family? Where is my family?" Every day he woke and walked with this group, rested at midday, and walked again until after dark. They slept on the ground. The terrain changed from scrub to woodland. They walked among strands of stunted trees. There was little to eat, a few fruits here or there, always either unripe or worm-rotten. Salva's peanuts were gone by the end of the 3rd day. After about a week, they were joined by more people, another group of Dinka, and several members of the tribe called Jur Chol. Men and women, boys and girls, young and old, walking and walking to nowhere. Salva had never been so hungry. He stumbled along, somehow moving one foot ahead of the other, not noticing the ground he walked on, or the forest around him, or the light in the sky. Nothing was real except his hunger. Once a hollow in his stomach, but now a deep buzzing pain in every part of him. Usually he walked among the Dinka, but today he shuffled along in a daze. He found he had fallen a little bit behind. Walking next to him was a young man from the Jurchol. Salva did not know him, except his name was Buska. As they walked along, Buska slowed down. Salva wondered sluggishly if they couldn't try to keep up a bit better. Just then, Buska stopped walking. Salva stopped too. He was too weak and hungry to ask why they were standing still. Buska cocked his head and furrowed his brow, listening. They stood motionless for several moments. Salva could hear the noise of the rest of the group ahead of them, a few faint voices, birds calling somewhere in the trees. He strained his ear. What was it? Jet planes? Bombs? Was the gunfire getting closer instead of farther away? Salva's fear began growing until it was even stronger than his hunger. Then, a slow smile spread over Buska's face. "There, you hear?" Selva frowned and shook his head. Yes, there it is. Come again. Bouska began walking very quickly. Selva struggled to keep up. Twice Bouska paused to listen, then kept going even faster. What? Selva started to ask. Bouska stopped abruptly in front of a very large tree. Yes, he said. Now go call the others. By now, Selva had caught the feeling of excitement. But what should I tell them? The bird, the one I was listening to, he led me right here. Bouska's smile was even bigger now. You see that? He pointed up at the branches of the tree. Beehive, a fine large one. Selva hurried off to call the rest of the group. He had heard of this, that the Jurchol could follow the call of a bird called to the honey guide, but he had never seen it done before. Honey. This night, they would feast. Chapter 5, Southern Sudan, 2008. There was a big lake 3 days' walk from Naya's village. Every year, when the rain stopped and the pond near the village dried up, Naya's family moved from their home to a camp near the big lake. Naya's family did not live by the lake all year round because of the fighting. Her tribe, the Nuer, often fought with the rival Dinka tribe over the land surrounding the lake. Men and boys were hurt and even killed when the two groups clashed, so Naya and the rest of her village lived at the lake only during the 5 months of the dry season, when both tribes were so busy struggling for survival that fighting occurred far less often. Like the pond back home, the lake was dried up, but because it was much bigger than the pond, the clay of the lake bed still held water. Naya's job at the lake camp was the same as at home, to fetch water. With her hands, she would dig a hole in the damp clay of the lake bed. She kept digging, scooping out handfuls of clay until the hole was as deep as her arm was long. The clay got wetter as she dug until at last water began to seep into the bottom of the hole. The water that filled the hole was filthy, more mud than liquid. It seeped in slowly so that it took a long time to collect, even a few gourds full. Naya would crouch by the hole, waiting for water, here for hours at a time. And every day for 5 long months, until the rains came, she and her family would then return home. Southern Sudan, 1985. Selva's eyes were swollen shut. Bouska's forearms were lumpy and raw. The friend of Bouska's tribe had a fat lip. They all looked as though they had been in a terrible fistfight, but their injuries weren't bruises, they were bee stings. A fire had been started under the tree, but to smoke the bees out of the hive and make them sleepy. But as Bouska and the other Jurchol men were removing the hive from the tree, the bees woke up and were not happy at all to discover that their home was being taken away. They expressed their unhappiness very clearly by buzzing, swarming, and stinging a lot. It was worth it, Selva thought as he touched his eye gingerly. His belly was a rounded lump stuffed full of honey and beeswax. Nothing had ever tasted so good as those pieces of honeycomb dripping with rich, luscious, sweet gold honey. Along with everyone else in the group, he had eaten as much as he could hold, and then a little more. All around him, people were licking their fingers in great satisfaction, except for one Dinka man who had been stung on his tongue. It had swollen so badly that he couldn't close his mouth. He could hardly swallow. Selva felt very sorry for him. The poor man did not even enjoy the honey. The walking seemed easier now that Selva had something in his belly. He managed to save one piece of the honeycomb and had wrapped it carefully in a leaf. By the end of the next day, all of the honey was gone, but Selva kept the beeswax in his mouth and chewed it for the memory of the sweetness. The group got a little bigger with each passing day. More people joined them, people who had been walking alone or in little clusters of 2 or 3. Selva made it a habit to survey the whole group every morning and evening, searching for his family, but they were never among the newcomers. One evening, a few weeks after Selva had joined the group, he made his usual walk around the fireside, scanning every face, hoping to see a familiar one. Then, ouch! Selva almost lost his footing on the ground underneath someone. He seemed to move. A boy jumped to his feet and stood in front of him. "Hey, that's my hand you stepped on!" The boy spoke Dinka, but it was a different accent, which meant that he was not from the area around Selva's villages. Selva took a step back. "I'm sorry, are you hurt?" The boy opened and closed his hands a few times, then shrugged. It's all right, but you really should watch where you're going. Sorry, Selva repeated. After a moment of silence, he turned away and began to search the crowd again. The boy was still looking at him. Your family? He asked. Selva shook his head. Me too, said the boy. He sighed, and Selva heard that sigh all the way into his heart. Their eyes met. I'm Selva. I'm Mariel. It was good to make a friend. Mariel was the same age as Selva. They were almost the same height. When they walked side by side, their strides were exactly the same length. Then the next morning, they began walking together. Do you know where we're going? Selva asked. Mariel tilted his head and put up his hand on his brow to shade his eyes from the rising sun. East, he said wisely. We are walking into the morning sun. Selva rolled his eyes. I know we're going east, he said. Anyone could tell you that, but where to the east? Mariel thought for a moment. Ethiopia, he said. East of Sudan is Ethiopia. Selva stopped walking. Ethiopia? That's another country. We can't walk all the way there. We're walking east, Mariel said firmly. Ethiopia is east. I can't go to another country, Selva thought. If I do, my family will never find me. Mariel put his arm around Selva's shoulders. He seemed to know what Selva was thinking. For, he said, it doesn't matter. Don't you know that if we keep walking east, we'll all go all the way around the world and come right back here to Sudan? That's when we'll find our families. Selva had to laugh. They were both laughing as they thought of walking again, arm in arm, their strides matching perfectly. More than a month had passed since Selva had run from his school into the bush. The group was now walking in the land of the Atort people. In the Dinka language, Atort were called the people of the lion. Their region was inhabited by large herds of antelope, wildebeest, gnus, and the lion that preyed on them. The Dinka told stories about the Artut. When the Artut person died, he came back to earth as a lion, with a great hunger for human flesh he once had. The lions in this region were said to be the fiercest in the world. Nights became uneasy. Selva woke often with the sound of the roars in the distance and sometimes to the deep squeal of an animal under the lion's claws. One morning he woke bleary-eyed after a poor sleep. He rubbed his eyes, rose, and stumbled after Mariel as they began walking again. Selva? It was not Mariel who had spoken. The voice came from behind him. Selva turned. His mouth fell open in amazement, but he could not speak. Selva! We'll find out who it is tomorrow.